Hi everybody, welcome to Julie in the Garden. I'm actually coming to you from my library today, but soon most of the videos will all be outside, so I'm looking forward to that. This video is actually about planting by the moon. So I am not an expert in this. This is something I kind of just like to dabble or experiment in, and so I do mention it here and there in my videos, and I've been thinking about it more recently, so I just wanted to make a kind of an intro video for you on my understanding of planting and gardening by the moon. And by that, I do not mean going out and planting by moonlight, although that does sound kind of awesome, and maybe I should try that at some point. But I mean timing when you are starting and transplanting and doing other garden tasks. By the moon phases. So there are actually two different parts of gardening by the moon. There's gardening by the moon phases. So you've got, new to quarter to full to quarter to new. And then there's also gardening by the moon signs, which is like the different, different zodiac signs or constellations that the moon moves through. I'm only focusing on the moon phase because it's a lot simpler and it makes sense to me. So that's where I'm going. In the future, maybe I'll look into the zodiac signs. I don't know. But if you are more interested in that, I'm going to link two resources below that I have used in like two websites. And one of them is Farmer's Almanac. And they always have really great information. And if you get their calendars, they actually have both the phase and the different sides of the moon incorporated in their calendars when they recommend to you what to do when. So they do incorporate that. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about the moon phases and how that influences the timing in the garden and how I'm planning on using it. So the idea here is very similar to the science behind how the moon affects the tides of the ocean and other waterways. So basically, as the moon moves through its phases around, moving around the earth, it affects the gravitational pull and affects water. So it will bring water, much like it moves water in and out in tides, it brings the moisture level up and down in the soil. And it can do this with apparently very small amounts of water, which is what you're seeing when you're talking about your garden versus, the ocean. There. So that's kind of the idea, the science behind it. And there's also different amounts of moonlight that can have effects on growth of plants. So that's why I'm trying this. Not only, I love the moon, and so why not? But also that kind of makes sense to me, that explanation. And I also know that there's lots of farmers that for decades have used these methods and swear by them. So why not at least experiment and give them a try? The timing is basically by week, by each phase of the moon. So you start with the first week is from the new moon to the first or second quarter. I generally refer to it as a first quarter moon. Oh, some people refer to it as a second quarter moon. So it's the between the new moon and the full moon. It's a half circle. Basically, they're that first half circle that you see in the moon phase. So this is the first week. And what's going on here is there's really strong gravitational pull. So there's a lot of water and moisture in the soil. And so it's really good, apparently, for planting crops. Well, I think in general, the waxing or moon getting bigger is good for planting a lot of the crops that you're eating, the above ground portion, if that makes sense. If you're eating a leaf or a fruit, as opposed to root crops like carrots, you're eating the root. But the first week in particular is good for the annual crops that are not putting their seeds in fruit. So things like the lettuces and the brassicas, and I think grains as well are in there in that category, just because of the high moisture content in the soil. The second week, which is between that first quarter moon and the full moon, there's apparently not as strong of a gravitational pull, but more moonlight. But it's still like rising water, like it's still like a rising feeling, right? The moon's getting bigger. And so you can think of like above ground crops still, but this time the ones that produce seeds within fruit So we got a lot of those, like tomatoes, peppers, squashes, cucumbers, all those things. That would be the ideal time by the moon phases to plant those. And apparently there is peak moisture in the soil just before the full moon. So that is a great time to sow those crops. So moving on to the third week is between the full moon and the last quarter moon. It's halfway full again, the other way. And apparently there's still a high gravitational pull, but the moisture is drawing down. So if you think of things that need more moisture, if you think about roots, so things like root veggies, like root crops like carrots, beets, turnips, rutabagas, things like that, and bulbs, like if you're planting flower bulbs or garlic bulbs, but also if you're transplanting or if you're planting perennials, that'd be great too, because you really want perennials, fruit trees and stuff, you really want them focus first on establishing a strong root system, which is again going down roots in the soil. So that third week between the full moon and the last quarter moon is a great week to do that. Then the final week, which is between the last quarter moon and the new moon, is more of a resting phase. A lot of the water has been, there's less moisture in the soil then, and there's a lower gravitational pull. And there's also a lot less moon than there just was the last 2 weeks. So I think of this resting time as a time to work the soil if you're going to work it, or amend it, to add compost or fertilizer, to prune. This is a good time to prune trees and shrubs, because if you think of it, the energy is more down in the roots. And yeah, so I think I mentioned that quickly in my pruning video, that it was like a good time of the moon I wanted to prune then. So I did try to prune during that fourth week there. The sources I read also said it's a good time to harvest and transplant. So I don't know if it's just because everything's kind of quiet and dormant, perhaps. It's a good time to do those things instead of the focus. It's not as much of a focus on growth, I guess, at that time. So that's my really quick introduction to gardening by the phases of the moon, at least to my understanding of it. And perhaps as I gain more experience with it, I can do more advanced videos and show you a little bit more. How am I using this? So I don't use this precisely. This is not the first thing I look at, because when I'm looking at my average frost dates, that's kind of my number one for my timing, and also just my weather, right? If it's too cold to put it outside, regardless of what the average frost dates say, I'm not going to put it outside. And also I'm a busy person, as I'm sure many of you are. I am a homeschool mom of 3 with 1 on the way, and I'm in charge of, the household, feeding everybody, as well as my extensive potager and berry garden and orchard that I'm working on. So for me, it's better to be able to just like get things done than to have it at the exact right time. But if I have the choice, then I am keeping these things in mind. For example, right now we are about 5.5 weeks out from our last frost date, as of when I'm filming this video, probably not when I'm posting it. And we are, I think today is actually a last quarter moon, so this next week will be a resting phase. And that is actually perfect. That is really what I need to do right now, is prep a lot of beds. I do have plants to start between the 4 to 6 week time period before my average last frost. But what I've decided to do is just hold off until I hit that new moon. So which will be about 5.5, a couple days before, 4 weeks before my average last frost. And so I'm just going to start a bunch of seeds then. Now, some of them, probably many of them, are ones that will be fruiting with the seeds in it. So ideally, I'd start them in the second week. But when I'm looking at timing, do I want to start them a whole week later? I'm not sure. So it would actually look more like a week and a half later. So I think I'll probably start them in that first phase, thinking that the moisture content in the waxing moon is better than doing it during that last week of the waning moon. So that's kind of my thought process on that and how I'm working with it. I might try it more strictly in the future when I just have more time and I don't have toddlers and pregnancy to contend with. But that is how I'm doing it now. And I'm sure I will mention it again as I go on and share my gardening adventures. I would love to know if any of you have experienced gardening by the moon phases. Let me know in the comments below. Also, make sure you subscribe and hit the thumbs up on this video to show that you liked it. And until next time, happy gardening.